The Caribbean Sea, today a paradise of turquoise waters and gentle breezes, was once the most dangerous place on Earth. In the early 1700s, it wasn't vacationers or cruise ships cutting through those waves. It was ghostly black sails, cannons loaded, crews singing drunken shanties, flags marked with skulls fluttering in the wind. The world called it the Golden Age of Piracy, but there was nothing golden about it, except the coins dripping from bloodied hands. This story doesn't begin with Jack Sparrow. It begins with real men, scarred and sunburned, abandoned by empires that had used them and thrown them away. Men who decided to take what the sea owed them. After the War of the Spanish Succession ended in 1713, thousands of sailors and privateers suddenly found themselves unemployed. The crowns of Europe, England, France, Spain, had been paying them to attack enemy ships under letters of marque, a legal license to plunder in the name of the king. But peace came, and with peace came betrayal. The same governments that once called them heroes now called them criminals. The British Admiralty sent word: all privateering licenses are revoked. Return to port immediately. But how could they return when there was nothing waiting for them except poverty? So they stayed at sea, and one by one, ships hoisted a different kind of flag, the Jolly Roger, the banner of the outcasts. Among these outcasts were names that would soon haunt the oceans: Edward Teach, Blackbeard; Charles Vane, Calico Jack Rackham; and Bonnie, Mary Red, Henry Jennings. They didn't start as monsters. Most were sailors, some were soldiers, others slaves who escaped brutal plantations and found freedom under the black flag. The sea didn't care about class or color, only loyalty and courage. By 1715, the Caribbean was infested with pirates. From Nassau in the Bahamas to Tortuga, Jamaica, and the coasts of Hispaniola, entire harbors became pirate republics. Nassau, in particular, was chaos incarnate. A tiny settlement of broken taverns, sunken ships, and rum-soaked men. Yet it became the capital of a new kind of democracy, brutal, drunken, but equal. Every man aboard a pirate ship had a vote. Captains were elected and could be overthrown by their crew. Spoils were divided according to strict rules. The captain got 2 shares, the quartermaster 1.5, the rest divided equally among the men. Even compensation for injuries was standardized. A lost arm meant 600 pieces of 8. A lost leg, 800. It was a twisted form of freedom, born from betrayal. And while Europe tried to pretend these men didn't exist, the pirates grew bolder. They didn't just attack merchant ships anymore. They went after the empires themselves. In 1715, a Spanish treasure fleet left Havana, bound for Cadiz. 11 ships, loaded with silver, gold, and jewels from the New World, worth over $400 million in today's money. Then, off the coast of Florida, a hurricane struck. The entire fleet sank. And before the Spanish could recover it, the pirates came. Men like Henry Jennings scavenged the wrecks, stealing treasure that had already been stolen from the Americas. They didn't see it as theft, they saw it as justice. Jennings and his men brought their loot to Nassau, and suddenly, the island exploded with wealth. Word spread like wildfire across the Atlantic. There's a pirate paradise in the Bahamas where the law has no reach. Thousands came. Former sailors, escaped convicts, Africans fleeing slavery, deserters from naval ships, even women disguised as men. Nassau was a melting pot of defiance and of revenge against the nations that had cast them aside. That's when Edward Teach, later known as Blackbeard, arrived. Tall, imposing, with burning eyes and a black beard so long, he braided it into knots tied with slow-burning fuses. He became a living nightmare. Before attacking, he would light the fuses, surrounding his face in smoke, looking like a demon risen from the sea. But Blackbeard wasn't just fear, he was strategy. His flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, carried 40 cannons and a crew of more than 300 men. He ruled the seas from the West Indies to the Carolinas. His greatest weapon wasn't his blade, but terror. Ships would surrender without a fight the moment they saw that black flag. Still, for all their ruthlessness, pirates weren't only villains. Some became legends of rebellion, symbols of freedom in an age of tyranny. Among them, Two names stand out for shattering every convention of the time: and Bonnie and Mary Red. Anne was an Irishwoman who ran away from her husband and joined Calico Jack, Rackham's crew disguised as a man. Mary, born in England, had lived much of her life pretending to be male to survive. When the two met aboard Rackham's ship, their secret identities became their bond. Together, they fought like lions, earning the respect of hardened men who had never trusted women on board. Their story, two fearless women fighting for their own freedom, became one of the greatest legends of the Caribbean. But as the pirate republic flourished, the world powers took notice. The British Empire, humiliated by the loss of its colonies to chaos, decided that the age of piracy had to end. In 1718, the King of England sent a message across the Atlantic: amnesty. Any pirate who surrendered within 1 year would be pardoned, but those who refused would be hunted down and executed. And so began the war against the pirates. Royal Navy ships, faster, larger, and better armed, began to close in. Dozens of pirate havens were destroyed. Captured men were hanged in public squares as a warning. But not everyone surrendered. Blackbeard didn't. He knew the sea was his only home, and that peace meant a noose. So he prepared for war. In November 1718, off the coast of North Carolina, the Royal Navy found him. Lieutenant Robert Maynard led the attack. The battle that followed would become one of the most brutal duels in maritime history. A storm of cannon fire, muskets, and blades in close quarters. By the time the smoke cleared, Blackbeard had been shot 5 times and stabbed more than 20. He kept fighting until his last breath. When he finally fell, Maynard ordered his head cut off and hung from his ship's bowsprit. The message was clear: the Golden Age of Piracy was ending. But the legend was just beginning. Even as empires reclaimed the seas, whispers continued in taverns from Jamaica to London. Whispers that Blackbeard's treasure was never found, that his ghost still haunted the waters of the Caribbean, that the pirates, though gone, had changed the world forever, showing that no crown, no empire, could ever truly control the sea. And deep beneath the waves, where countless ships still rest in silence, their stories remain. The year was 1718. The sea was divided between two worlds. To the north, the flags of empires: Spanish galleons, British frigates, French merchantmen, disciplined, organized, and loyal to their kings. To the south, chaos. Black sails and weather-beaten ships filled with men who answered to no one but the ocean. But empires do not tolerate rebellion, and the pirates had gone too far. The British Crown, furious over the disruption of trade and humiliation at sea, launched a campaign of extermination. The man chosen to lead it was Woodes Rogers, a former privateer who once raided Spanish ships himself, now turned royal governor of the Bahamas. His mission: cleanse Nassau. Rogers arrived with warships, soldiers, and a royal decree offering amnesty to all pirates who surrendered, and the gallows to those who refused. The moment his fleet appeared on the horizon, Nassau trembled. The pirates' paradise, that haven of rum, gold, and freedom, was about to fall. Many accepted the pardon. Men like Charles Vane refused. Vane, cunning and violent, was everything the British feared in a pirate. He saw Rogers not as a savior but as a tyrant wearing a different crown. Vane fled Nassau with his ship Ranger, vowing to never bow to any empire again. His story would soon become one of the last great tales of defiance on the Caribbean Sea. Vane's ship was small, but his reputation was massive. He raided merchantmen across the Windward Passage, burning those who resisted. His cruelty terrified even his own men, yet they followed him because he was fearless. But the seas were changing. While Vane fought to keep the old dream of piracy alive, Blackbeard saw what was coming. The noose was tightening, and even demons of the sea knew when to vanish. In a rare act of cunning diplomacy, Blackbeard accepted the king's pardon, at least for a while. He married the daughter of a local planter in North Carolina, settled near the coast, and pretended to be a gentleman. But peace was never his nature. Within months, he was back on the water, quietly raiding ships under false flags. To the world, Edward Teach had retired. But to the sailors who disappeared without a trace, Blackbeard was still out there, watching from the fog. When the British Navy realized the truth, they sent Lieutenant Robert Maynard to end the legend. Their confrontation at Ocracoke Inlet became the stuff of nightmares, ending with Blackbeard's death and his severed head displayed as a warning. But in Nassau, another story was unfolding. Governor Rogers' crackdown had worked. The taverns were quiet, the brothels empty. The pirate republic had become a naval base once again. Yet, even as order returned, resentment festered beneath the surface. Because pirates hadn't just been criminals, they had been symbols. To many poor sailors, enslaved Africans, and outcasts, the pirate flag had meant something more powerful than gold. Freedom from kings and masters. And that idea would never die easily. Across the sea, another figure was rising. A man named Bartholomew Roberts, or Black Bart. Unlike Blackbeard, Roberts wasn't a monster. He was elegant, intelligent, and ruthless in calculation. A Welsh sailor who had once despised piracy, he was captured by pirates, and then joined them. Within weeks, his charisma and leadership made him captain. Roberts transformed piracy from drunken chaos into military precision. He enforced discipline aboard his ship Royal Fortune, and his men adored him. Where Blackbeard inspired fear, Roberts inspired loyalty. Between 1719 and 1722, he captured more than 400 ships, an unmatched record. He dressed in crimson velvet and gold lace, carried pistols across his chest, and held mass on Sundays. He forbade gambling, drunkenness during battle, and violence against women. To his crew, he was not just a captain, he was a commander of destiny. His code of conduct became legendary. Every man had a vote in important decisions. Loot was divided equally. Theft among pirates was punishable by marooning. Lights out at 8 p.m., no exceptions. It was democracy, discipline, and defiance all at once. But even Roberts couldn't fight the full weight of empire. In 1722, off the coast of Africa, the British warship Swallow ambushed him. A single cannonball tore through his neck. Roberts fell instantly, dying without a sound. His men, refusing to let the British take his body, threw it into the sea wrapped in silk. With his death, the heart of the Golden Age stopped beating. By 1725, the Caribbean had been cleansed. The gallows were full and the black flags lowered. But something extraordinary happened in the aftermath. The myth began to grow. The same governments that had destroyed the pirates now romanticized them. In taverns from London to Marseille, people whispered tales of noble outlaws and cursed treasure. Pamphlets and ballads told of brave men defying tyranny. The pirates became legends, heroes in disguise. Still, the reality was far darker. For every pirate who found freedom, thousands died in agony, from disease, starvation, or hanging. Those who survived often ended up begging in the streets of Port Royal or Kingston, forgotten by the world they once defied. Yet their influence lingered. In the centuries that followed, the pirate spirit evolved. The Caribbean, once soaked in blood, became a crossroads of culture, shaped by rebellion and survival. And though the empires had won, they could never fully erase what the pirates had started. The dream of living by one's own rules. That dream would reappear centuries later, in revolutionaries, smugglers, explorers, and even in the stories we tell today. Because deep down, the pirates represented something timeless. Not evil, not greed, but the eternal struggle between order and freedom. When you look at a map of the Caribbean today, the turquoise waters, the silent reefs, the forgotten forts half buried in jungle, remember that every inch of it was once a battlefield between kings and outlaws. And though the waves have washed away the blood, if you listen closely, you might still hear the echo of a cannon, or the faint whisper of a sea shanty carried by the wind. The empires had struck back, but the legend refused to die. By the mid-1720s, the roar of cannons across the Caribbean had faded, but the echo of rebellion lingered like a haunting melody carried by the wind. The Golden Age of Piracy was ending, or so the kings of Europe believed. In truth, the story was only shifting. The black flags may have fallen, but new sails, more dangerous and cunning, began to rise in their place. While gallows swayed in Port Royal and Nassau turned into a naval fortress, the Caribbean remained what it had always been, a chessboard of empires. Spain still clung to its treasure fleets, shipping silver and gold from the New World to Europe. Britain sought to dominate the sea routes, while France, scarred by wars on the continent, turned to a different strategy, one of secrecy and deception. And in that shadowed game, the line between pirate, corsair, and spy began to blur. The French were masters of reinvention. When open piracy became too dangerous, they gave it a new name, privateering, and a royal seal. Under the blessing of King Louis XV, men who might once have been hanged for piracy now became corsairs of His Majesty. They flew the French flag by day and hunted Spanish and British ships by night. From Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, to Guadeloupe, the Caribbean's blue waters became a silent war zone once more. One of the most feared among them was Jean-Baptiste Ducasse, a name whispered by sailors as if invoking a curse. Ducasse began as a merchant, but gold changed him. He turned corsair and attacked Spanish ports from Cartagena to Veracruz, seizing cargo worth millions. Yet, unlike the chaotic pirates before him, Ducasse kept meticulous records. Every coin, every ship, every life. His raids weren't just crimes. They were strategies of war. The irony was impossible to ignore. The same empires that once hanged pirates now paid them. For the Spanish crown, the Caribbean had become a nightmare. The golden galleons of the treasure fleet were the beating heart of Spain's economy. Each voyage carried silver from Mexico, gold from Peru, and emeralds from Colombia. To protect them, Spain built the legendary convoy system, guarded by warships known as galleons de guerra. But storms, corruption, and betrayal often proved deadlier than cannon fire. In 1733, a hurricane struck off the Florida Keys, wrecking nearly an entire fleet. The survivors' cries echoed through the mangroves as treasure sank beneath the waves. Within weeks, wreckers, smugglers, and fortune hunters flooded the area. Among them, men who still called themselves pirates, though the world no longer recognized them. They weren't the outlaws of old, but scavengers of empire. Divers, traders, and shadow figures who made their living on what others had lost. It was the birth of a new kind of piracy, salvage piracy. And it would last centuries longer than the pirates themselves. Beneath the surface, the Caribbean's underworld was alive. Former pirates turned informants, merchants became smugglers, and colonial governors profited quietly from the same men they condemned. The British, French, Dutch, and Spanish all maintained hidden networks of agents who bribed, spied, and sabotaged each other for control of sugar, gold, and slaves. In Jamaica, Havana, and Curacao, taverns once filled with drunken pirates now buzzed with whispers of political plots. Documents vanished. Cargo disappeared. Ships sank mysteriously before reaching their ports. And in that murky world, one name began to rise, and Bonnie, the woman who refused to vanish into history. Captured years earlier alongside Calico Jack Rackham, and had vanished from records after her trial. Some claimed she died in prison. Others said her father, a wealthy landowner, bribed her freedom. But Caribbean folklore insists she escaped and became something else entirely. A ghost of the islands, leading smugglers from the shadows. Whether real or legend, her story embodied what the Caribbean had become. A place where the boundaries between truth and myth had dissolved like salt in water. As piracy faded, another empire quietly rose. Not of black sails, but of sugar and slavery. Plantations spread across the islands like wildfire. To feed Europe's hunger for sweetness, millions of enslaved Africans were brought to the Caribbean in chains. Their forced labor built the fortunes that replaced pirate gold, and their suffering became the true legacy of empire. Former pirate ports like Nassau, Port Royal, and Bridgetown transformed into centers of commerce, guarded by fortresses and cannons once aimed at their own people. But rebellion was in the Caribbean's blood. In Saint-Domingue, whispers of revolt spread among the enslaved, stories of freedom told by old sailors who once served under the Jolly Roger. Some said the spirit of piracy had been reborn in the hearts of those who refused to kneel, no matter the cost, and indeed, by the end of the century, the Haitian Revolution would erupt. A storm of vengeance that would shake the world and end France's might in the Caribbean forever. It was as if the ghosts of the pirates had returned, not with cutlasses and cannons, but with fire and fury. Meanwhile, European navies grew stronger, smarter, and more ruthless. But even as they cleaned the seas, piracy found new masks. Privateers became mercenaries, hired by anyone willing to pay. Merchants smuggled weapons to rebels and slaves. Governors profited from secret deals. The black flags were gone, but the spirit remained. In 1740, during the War of Jenkins' Ear, the Caribbean once again exploded in chaos. British privateers raided Spanish colonies under official license. One of them was Captain Henry Morgan, once branded a pirate, now knighted by the crown. The hypocrisy was staggering. The same man who once burned Panama to the ground was now the deputy governor of Jamaica. The line between pirate and patriot was not just thin, it was non-existent. Even after the wars, rumors persisted of hidden treasure buried on forgotten islands. Gold sealed in caves, maps carved into driftwood, and curses guarding the dead. Many of these stories were born from truth. Blackbeard's rumored hoard, Robert's silk-wrapped fortune, Spanish chests lost to hurricanes. They became legends retold by sailors for generations. In the 1800s, British explorers returned to the Caribbean not as conquerors, but as treasure hunters, armed with compasses and greed. They dug through jungles, explored shipwrecks, and built the mythology we know today. But none ever found the riches they sought. Only bones, rusted cutlasses, and the eerie silence of time, because the real treasure of the Caribbean was never gold. It was freedom, raw, fleeting, and terrifying. By the end of the 18th century, the age of sail was transforming. Steamships replaced galleons. Cannons gave way to industry, and yet, the memory of the pirates endured. Artists painted them as romantic rebels. Writers turned them into tragic heroes. And centuries later, Hollywood would make them immortal, rewriting history into legend. But behind the fantasy, the truth remains buried in salt and sand. The pirates weren't just criminals. They were a reflection of everything the empires tried to suppress: rebellion, equality, and the human thirst for freedom. When they vanished, the Caribbean didn't become peaceful. It became quieter. And in that silence, the stories grew louder. Every island still whispers them. In the creak of old ships, the ruins of forts, and the shadows that dance on moonlit waves. Because though the world changed, one truth never did. You can kill a man, you can sink a ship, but you can't drown an idea. By the dawn of the 18th century's final years, the Caribbean had changed. The smell of gunpowder no longer ruled its winds, and the once feared Jolly Roger had become a ghostly memory. But for those who lived through the chaos, the silence was haunting. The seas that once echoed with cannon fire were now ruled by empire. British flags flew over Jamaica, Barbados, and the Bahamas. Spanish forts loomed across Havana and Cartagena, and the French, bleeding from wars in Europe, clung desperately to their last jewel, Saint-Domingue, the richest colony on Earth. But beneath the surface, something darker was brewing. For even though the pirates were gone, the Caribbean still pulsed with rebellion, and the last men who carried the spirit of the black flag refused to fade quietly into history. When the Golden Age of Piracy ended, many believed that the pirate republics of the Caribbean were wiped out completely. Nassau, once the capital of the world's most dangerous brotherhood, was now under British rule. Its taverns were silent, its docks guarded. But deep within the islands, far from imperial eyes, communities of outlaws survived. They called themselves free sailors. Some were escaped slaves, others deserters from European navies. They lived on hidden cays and uncharted islets, trading stolen goods, rum, and secrets. Their leaders weren't kings or governors, but captains chosen by vote, men and women who ruled only as long as they were respected. They were the last echo of a dream, the dream of freedom that had once united pirates against all crowns. It was fragile. It was dying. But for a moment, it burned brighter than ever. As empires fought their endless wars, the Caribbean once again became a battlefield. Not for pirates, but for privateers. Licensed by kings, these men sailed under letters of marque, attacking enemy ships legally. To the world, they were heroes. To those who knew better, they were pirates reborn, only this time paid by the very governments that once hunted them. Among them rose one of the last great names of the sea, Captain Woodes Rogers. He had once hunted pirates across the Caribbean, capturing many who had terrorized the region. But in the end, he became the thing he fought against, a ruthless opportunist navigating between law and chaos. Rogers governed Nassau with an iron hand, enforcing the king's peace through violence. Yet behind closed doors, he cut deals with smugglers, sold protection to merchants, and ensured that the black market gold still flowed. In his own way, he was the last pirate to rule Nassau. While Europe fought over colonies, the Caribbean's true power, its people, began to awaken. The enslaved Africans who worked the sugar plantations had seen the rise and fall of pirates. They had heard the stories of men who defied kings and lived by their own code. And slowly, those stories became fuel. In 1791, in the mountains of Saint-Domingue, the enslaved rose up. Led by Toussaint Louverture, a man of intelligence and strategy, they fought the French, the British, and the Spanish and won. It was the only successful slave revolt in history, and it created the first Black Republic. Haiti. The revolution sent shockwaves through the world. To the empires, it was a nightmare. To the oppressed, it was proof that the impossible could be done. And to the last surviving pirates, hidden in the shadows of the islands, it was the final sign that their spirit had found a new vessel. The pirates were gone, but rebellion lived on. Long after the cannons fell silent, legends spread across the Caribbean. Of gold buried beneath volcanic ash, of chests locked with blood seals, and of ships still glittering beneath the waves. One tale spoke of La Isla de Muerta, the island of the dead, said to be cursed by the souls of pirates who hid their plunder there. Another told of Henry Morgan's treasure, buried near Port Royal before the earthquake of 1692 swallowed half the city into the sea. Even British soldiers who guarded those ruins swore they heard voices in the water, whispers in the night, calling them by name. Treasure hunters came in droves. Adventurers, merchants, and desperate men seeking fortune. Few returned. Those who did often came back changed, pale, silent, haunted. It wasn't just superstition. Many drowned, poisoned by gas pockets or crushed by collapsing tunnels. But the Caribbean didn't care about their reasons. For centuries, it had fed on greed, and it wasn't done yet. The curse of the treasure islands wasn't gold. It was the hunger for it. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, one man still dared to fly the black flag. Benito de Soto, a Spaniard turned outlaw. Born poor in Galicia, he joined a merchant ship bound for Havana. But somewhere along the journey, he killed his captain, seized the ship, and turned to piracy. De Soto was ruthless, unpredictable, and cunning, a ghost born too late for his time. He plundered ships along the Atlantic, from Brazil to the Azores, leaving no survivors. His ship, the Morning Star, became infamous for its blood-red sails and the crucifix nailed upside down on its prow. But his reign was short. In 1828, the British Navy captured him near Gibraltar. He was tried, hanged, and displayed in chains, the last true pirate to die for his crimes. With his death, the age of piracy ended. The Caribbean belonged to the empires now, but they would soon face their own reckoning. Britain's dominance in the Caribbean came at a terrible price. The same ships that once hunted pirates now carried slaves. The same governors who crushed rebellion now built fortunes from blood. But the sea has a memory, and the Caribbean never forgave easily. Hurricanes destroyed plantations. Slave revolts spread from island to island. Naval mutinies erupted, and slowly, the empire's grip began to crack. The seas that had once been ruled by pirates now became the grave of imperial arrogance. Shipwrecks littered the ocean floor, from galleons to slave ships, all swallowed by the same indifferent tide. It was as if the Caribbean itself had turned against its conquerors. By the mid-19th century, the pirates had become legend. Books romanticized them. Painters captured their battles in brilliant, bloody strokes. And in every sailor's tavern, their ghosts were still alive, haunting the waves, whispering in the rum-soaked nights. Stories of Blackbeard's headless body swimming around his ship, or of and Bonny's cursed descendants, spread across generations. Parents warned children of the sea devils who would come for greedy souls. Yet, for all the fear, there was fascination, because deep down, people admired the pirates for their courage, their defiance, their freedom. They were the last men and women who dared to live outside the chains of kings and empires. And even in death, they refused to be forgotten. Today, the Caribbean looks peaceful. Turquoise waters, white sands, and luxury yachts replacing the black sails of old. But if you dive deep enough, the sea still keeps its secrets. Beneath coral reefs lie the bones of galleons, the rusted cannons, the silver coins stamped with the mark of forgotten kings. Every wreck is a story, every wave a whisper of what once was. And when the sun sets over the horizon, painting the sea crimson and gold, it's easy to imagine that somewhere, out there, a ghost ship still sails. The sails black as night, its captain grinning beneath a shadowed hat, and its crew made not of men, but of memories. Because in the end, the Caribbean belongs to no one. Not kings, not merchants, not nations. It belongs to the sea itself, and to those brave enough to defy it. The pirates may have died, but their spirit endures, in every storm, in every rebellion, and in every soul who dares to chase freedom, no matter the cost. The waves roll quietly now, whispering through the turquoise waters of the Caribbean. Tourists sail through the same routes once haunted by cannons, screams, and smoke. But if you listen closely, when the wind howls across the old Spanish Main, you can almost hear them. The echo of drums, the creak of masts, and the laughter of men who defied the world. They are gone, yes, but their legend still commands the sea. Beneath the peaceful surface of the Caribbean lies a hidden graveyard. Thousands of wrecks, galleons, sloops, and frigates rest silently, their wooden hulls rotting under centuries of coral. Divers who descend into the depths often describe the same feeling, a heavy presence, as if they're being watched. One diver claimed that while exploring a wreck off the coast of Nassau, he found an old compass, perfectly preserved, still pointing north. But when he returned to the surface, his equipment readings were scrambled. His compass spun wildly, as if the sea refused to give back what it had taken. Was it superstition, or something more? After all, the Caribbean was never just a place. It was a graveyard of ambition, greed, and defiance. To understand why pirates still fascinate us, you have to look beyond the myths. Behind the gold and blood, they stood for something revolutionary, something that even today feels dangerous. They created their own societies outside of kings and empires. They voted for their captains. They shared the spoils equally. They didn't care about bloodlines or titles. On a pirate ship, the color of your skin or the name of your father didn't matter. Only loyalty and courage did. For many, it was the first taste of true equality. Centuries before revolutions swept across Europe, the pirates of the Caribbean were already living by their own kind of freedom, one forged through chaos and danger. And that's what made them so powerful and so feared. Even when their bodies were hanged and their ships burned, the idea, the spirit of rebellion, refused to die. The irony of it all? The very empires that destroyed the pirates inherited their spirit. British admirals began studying pirate tactics. French privateers adopted their discipline. Even the American Navy, newly born from rebellion, borrowed their fearlessness. Every empire that rose afterward carried a trace of the black flag in its veins. Because no matter how much the world changed, every ruler knew one thing. There would always be men and women unwilling to kneel. Centuries later, the pirates would rise again. This time, not on the sea, but on the screen. Hollywood turned them into romantic heroes. Swaggering, witty, fearless, and charming. Movies like Pirates of the Caribbean painted them as freedom-loving rebels, cursed lovers, and tragic outlaws. But the truth was far more brutal. The real pirates didn't sing. They screamed. They didn't charm. They threatened. And yet, in that ugliness, there was something undeniably human. Because deep down, the pirates represented what every person dreams of: absolute freedom, the right to live by your own rules, even if the price is death. And so, their legend lives on, dressed in fantasy, but born from truth. In recent decades, archaeologists have begun uncovering the real traces of that golden age. Cannonballs fused with coral, pistols encrusted in silver salt, and skeletons still bound by chains. Each discovery adds another line to the story, a story that refuses to end. Near the coast of Haiti, divers found the wreck of La Concorde, the ship that Blackbeard captured and renamed Queen Anne's Revenge. Its cannons still lay on the seabed, perfectly aligned, as if waiting for orders. Its anchor, the same that once held it steady during raids, now sits in a museum, rusted but unbroken. When visitors walk past it, they don't see iron. They see defiance. They see a man who took a king's ship and turned it into a floating revolution. Pirate history often glorifies men, Blackbeard, Morgan, Kidd. But the seas also belong to women. And Bonnie, Mary Red, Grace O'Malley. They lived and fought with the same ferocity as their male counterparts. And Bonnie once screamed to a captured crew, "If you had fought like men, you needn't be hanged like dogs." They dressed as men to gain respect, but their rage and intelligence outshone many of their peers. They didn't fight for treasure. They fought for the right to exist in a world that denied them everything. In many ways, they were the first rebels against gender itself, long before the word feminism existed. It's easy to romanticize pirates, but their age was one of unimaginable cruelty. The gold they chased came from stolen lands. The sugar they drank in their rum came from the backs of enslaved people. Every battle they fought, every ship they sank, was a piece of a much larger nightmare. A world where greed ruled everything. And perhaps that's why their story feels eternal. Because even today, humanity still struggles with the same curse. The hunger for more. The pirates were both villains and symbols, a mirror of everything beautiful and terrible about freedom. They remind us that freedom without conscience becomes chaos, and power without limits becomes tyranny. Today, sailors crossing the old pirate routes sometimes report strange phenomena. Ghost lights flickering over the water, sudden fogs rising from calm seas. Locals whisper that it's the souls of drowned pirates, still guarding their treasures, or perhaps their secrets. But maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the sea itself, reminding us that we are guests, not rulers. Every island in the Caribbean carries their mark. Every wave carries a whisper. Every storm, a memory. And when the thunder rolls, it sounds almost like cannons. In the end, the pirates lost their war, but they won something far greater. They became eternal. From music to movies, from tattoos to flags flown by bikers and rebels, the skull and crossbones remains a global symbol of defiance. It's not about crime anymore. It's about courage. About living by your own code when the world tries to cage you. And maybe that's the real treasure they left behind. Not gold, not fame, but the idea that freedom is worth the fight, no matter how dangerous the sea becomes. The sun sets over the Caribbean, painting the horizon in molten gold. Waves crash against forgotten forts, washing away the footprints of history. And in the fading light, a single ship appears. Its sails black, its flag fluttering in the wind. It's only an illusion, or maybe a memory, because somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, the last pirate still sails. He doesn't seek gold. He doesn't seek glory. He sails for one reason only, because the sea will never let him rest. The story of the Caribbean's pirates isn't just about the past. It's a mirror for the present. Every generation finds its own version of the black flag. Rebels, dreamers, and outcasts who refuse to bow. So tell me, would you have raised the black flag? Would you have sailed into the storm, knowing the world would hunt you? If this story fascinated you, drop your answer in the comments and make sure to subscribe, because the next voyage will take us deeper into the darkest secrets of history, where truth and legend are separated by nothing but a thin line of fog. Because here, every story hides a ghost, and the sea, it never forgets.